Hey folks, today we are talking about the developments of the 1970s, some of which you may know, some you may not, but let's run through this really quickly so that you have it. We're going to be talking about immigration, refugee aid, the development of Canada as a multicultural country, the baby boom, and then the new anthem, which we covered earlier in class today. So, a couple things to note that prior to the 1960s, most immigrants in Canada were still coming from either Britain or the United States. The Immigration Acts of 1968 and 1970 drastically changed the immigration trends, though, that were happening in Canada because the point system was developed. We also developed the sponsor program to ensure that there was equality in immigration, that we had people from coming all over the world. And so this is the need for skilled laborers. And so we have immigrants coming from Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America. What's really cool about this is that my dad immigrated during this time period, and he talks about how hard it was to actually get into Canada because you had to pass a couple of different tests, and he was a skilled trades worker. So for him, it meant a totally different and good lifestyle, but he actually failed his immigration test 3 times, and he was saying he was just praying and hoping that he would pass the second time around. With regards to immigration, we also need to talk about refugee status. And so conflict around the world also increased the need for Canada to accept refugees. So no, we're not seeing World War I, World War II anymore, but we're starting to see the Korean War, the Vietnam War. And so with those situations, we see many people needing to escape their home. So, for example, in the 1917s, you have the Vietnam War happening, and you have thousands of Vietnamese coming to Canada fleeing communism. You also see other regions of conflict, like I mentioned. You have Laos, Cambodia, El Salvador, Iraq, the Balkans. All of them are starting to see massive amounts of conflict, and so you are seeing immigration to Canada as a result via refugee status. And so because of this, we start to see that catchphrase of Canada being the quilt or the salad or whatever you were taught in grade school, but Canada as a multicultural country. And under Pierre Elliott Trudeau, multiculturalism became Canada's official policy of the country. Immigrants to the country were encouraged to continue their own unique cultures within Canada, and Canada became known as the mosaic rather than the melting pot. And again, this could be the salad analogy, this could be the quilt analogy, whatever you were told. The idea was if you immigrated to Canada, again, either refugee status or as a proper immigrant, and maybe my language there is flawed, but the idea was you get to come and continue to worship, to practice, to eat, to live in a way that you are already comfortable with and know, but also start to engage in quote-unquote Canadian culture. And so one of these pictures that we have here is how does this artwork reflect Canadian diversity? And I think you'll see a lot of different things that are present here. What is interesting to me, though, there are a couple things missing, and maybe you can spot those. But after World War II, we also see something called the baby boom, and that's going to drastically impact life in the 1970s and culture in the 1970s, as well as immigration. Because from 46 to 61, you have over 4 million children being born. This time period becomes known as the baby boom. And during the 1970s, these boomers who were born post-World War II are now big influencers because they are going to impact education, employment, entertainment. Who culture is catering towards is this group. Now, my parents are part of the boomer generation, and so they are a very, very big group. They have very different not cultural expectations, but lifestyle expectations. So they were the group that was, you don't have to go to university or college. It's good for you, but you don't have to. You just need to work hard and you'll get a job and you'll get a house and you'll move up in management. And so I've said to you guys many times before that this is the group in Windsor where I grew up, where you got a job at Ford's right out of high school and you worked that job for 25 years. You had a pension, you had benefits, and that got you where you needed to be. So these guys are heavily, heavily influential on our country. Even today, they impact things like our Canadian pension plan. There's a lot to be said about the boomers. Definitely worth looking into if you are a fan of history. So just to show you graph-wise in terms of like the births in Canada, again, you see 1930s fairly low, makes sense. We're in the middle of the war period, but then it's like, holy smokes, we've got upwards of almost 500,000 births within that time period. So that's huge. That's a big increase. Now, again, in terms of effects of the baby boom, if you have all these kids, you now need more schools. You have 500,000 new students that are entering schools each year. There's an increased demand for products, which stimulates the economy. People need more clothes, more shoes, more books, more whatever. So that's going to stimulate job growth. In the 1970s, there's also a massive amount, people needed jobs and there were jobs to be had. There's also high demand for new housing, and so this is the beginning actually of the suburb culture. This is when things like the DVP are being built. Massive change happening in Ontario. But by the 1980s, more and more the baby boomers entered the workforce, and so you have the highest rates of unemployment since the Depression. And so the 80s were traditionally a very, very difficult time. And then the question here is as to how will baby boomers affect pension services? When I was younger, the pension was actually, you could retire at 55. There was something called the Freedom 55 plan. So between the government and your own banking, the idea was to retire at 55. As of last year, the retirement age in order to receive your CPP, which is your Canadian pension plan that you will pay into when you have a job, CPP is now set at, I believe, 68. It's either 66 or 68. So definite difference because they had too many people collecting their pensions all at once. So again, just in terms of like overview of the time period, the Cold War continues. Again, we kind of left the fear stuff to the side for a little bit, but French-English relations are also very strained, but there's still a lot of positivity in Canada. Again, immigration is becoming more equal. We're reaching out to refugees at this point in time, and then we have the creation of this cultural identity of Canada as being multicultural, which I think is something that we're still very, very proud of today. We're going to add to that identity statement as we go into our next couple of lessons next week before we end our course. But being multicultural, being peacekeepers, those are the things that we are known for even now, 50 years down the road. So hopefully that's helpful to you guys. I will speak to you soon. Have a great afternoon. Be well.